G'day, Mike from Aussie Mike's Bees and the Hawkesbury Beekeepers Club. This is part 3 of the long Langstroth beehive build. This time we're getting into the workshop and cut some wood, but before we do, a quick little indication of where we'll be at. So in this build I'll get as far as the main part of the box, but I ran out of time to be able to do the roof, so that'll be in part 4. Also coming up in part 4 is hot wax dipping the whole arrangement, and I might even do a bit of painting or lining the roof with tin or mini orb. Haven't decided on that yet. Stay tuned and we'll see. But also in part 4 we want to put bees in there and get it started. Also the individual components that go inside there. So the cover slats, the follower board, the queen excluder. So a number of things still coming up that I ran out of time for this time. So we're in the workshop, and the first thing we need to do is get our wood the right dimensions and in a way that we can use it, flat and level and square. When the wood comes out of the mill and it's been drying, air drying in the workshop for 10 months or more, it's not going to be flat. If you see that, it's curved on the end like that, it's cupped. So we need to take that cupping out of it. There's also, it's rough, so you've got a rough finish, and we'll smooth that off. The process that we go through is first to go through a planer, which is a machine that you run over a flat wide spinning blade, and you run the wood through from end to end enough times to take all of that cupping out, and you've got one side of the wood perfectly flat. Then the next stage is to put it into a thicknesser. It takes the top level down until you've reached a particular thickness, but in the process of doing that, it's pushing the flat side onto the cast iron base and trimming out all of the deformities in the top surface. There's other deformities to deal with too, such as knot holes. I've got some knots to deal with, and I'll use epoxy, because knots that go clean through, that can be a problem. The next step is to rip in the table saw the pieces of wood to the correct width, and where I need to add 2 pieces together to come wider than the available wood, I edge glue and clamp those and leave it overnight until it's set. We'll be joining pieces of wood. In this case, I'm using finger joints. Very solid, very strong joint. Let's get going. I pass each board across the planer multiple times until it's dead flat. Now I run each board through the thicknesser until I bring it down to my desired thickness, which in this case is 22.5 millimeters. And out it comes, smooth as silk. Now I've ripped all the lengths that I need, and I've ripped this little piece off to join, because you remember last time I said I'd be adding a piece to the top to put the rebate in for the frame hanger. And at the time I think I said 25 millimeters. Well, I'm going with 75 millimeters because I've worked out how I'm going to do the bottom. I'd only just thought of it this week. So what I've got to do now is edge join. I also talked about dowels and biscuit joins, but modern glues like Type Bond 2 is what I use. It's waterproof, it's indoor, outdoor, and easy to clean up. And it's stronger than the wood itself. So the edge join for this will be extremely strong. The only part where it might come unstuck, pun intended, is in the hot wax dipping. because we're taking it up to 150 degrees Celsius and the glue might not handle that. Now, I've used glue in finger joints and it's worked okay, but that's been supported by screws as well, glue and screw. But this, I'm only using the glue for the edge joints. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. Anyway, what do? All we do with an edge joint is pop our glue open and give a bead along there. How much? Just enough. So I'm just doing a bead along there. That'll do, and I want to spread that out nice and evenly. Now the pros will use a brush. I'll use my finger. I know where the finger is, whereas a brush, I could lose it. I often lose it, lose the plot that is. So I'm just spreading that out evenly because I want a nice even coat to get all the wood covered. We've got a bit of work time. This glue doesn't go off straight away. In fact, we want to clamp it after this and leave it. I like to leave it overnight. That's maximum, but you can take the clamps off after a couple of hours. Right, I think we got that right. And you might be saying, well, what about spreading it on the other side when we join it up? Well, the clamps will take care of that. So I'm just going to line that up. Now it's on my saw table, but I'm putting it over the miter slot so it doesn't get glue on the table. But it doesn't matter too much. Now it's a nice finish there. So then we just get on our clamps, pipe clamps or anything you've got. I just go lightly at first. That's looking good. And what I'm doing is I'm just squeezing out a little bit. And then I know I'm tight enough, but not too tight. If it squeezes out a lot, it doesn't need a whole lot of pressure. But we want to close up the gap completely so that it's wood on wood. And then we've got the wide board that we need to do the job. It's the next day, it's a full day, more than 24 hours since I clamped these up. So now we can pull them all off and we'll have nice wide boards. Good and strong, bit of glue blowout there that I can clean up, but I can run it through the sander for that. The first thing we do is seal up the underside of the holes so the epoxy doesn't leak out. So I'm just going to use some duct tape because the epoxy is fairly runny and we don't want it leaking through and spilling everywhere. Here I'm using the finger joint jig that I made a few years ago that I used to make the finger joints on the normal bee boxes. Works exactly the same for the long laying, except the extra length makes it a little more cumbersome. I made this jig so that I could do the ends of all 4 boards at once. So it takes 2 operations like you're seeing here. One on this end, and then I'll flip the whole arrangement over and do the other end. Saves a lot of time, a little bit heavier going with this as I said, but it gets it done pretty good, and usually you get a really nice tight snug finger joint. Sometimes a little too tight, but good enough.
Once we've cut all the fingers, it's time for a dry fit to make sure everything goes together as planned. And as usual with this jig, everything fits together pretty much like a finger in a baby's bum. Oh, are you allowed to say that anymore? The thought police might get me for that. Fits together snug. In this operation, I'm putting in the entry slots using the router table in 3 different depths of cut. This is a final cut that you're seeing here. And I've done 2. I've cut these pair of slots to match the dimensions of a Guardian small hive beetle entry trap. I've not used these before. I've seen them online and read a little about them, so here's hoping that they work. We'll soon find out. Now this is the way I brand my hives. I happen to have a 100-watt laser engraver. It works a little like an inkjet printer, except instead of spraying bubbles of ink onto the substrate, which is the wood in this case, it fires a laser beam and burns into the wood, vaporizing the layer of wood. I can actually burn really deep. I could go 10 millimeters deep if I wanted to. It would take longer and more power and slower and so on. This scan is going at about 1/2 mil deep, and that colour is the wood charred. It's kind of like watching grass grow, so this is 10 times normal speed. For tech nerds like me, I love watching this thing, but for normal people, I think you'd be pretty bored. It takes quite a while. So here's our flash brand bearing the Hawkesbury Beekeepers Club brand number, NH368.
So I'm going to start assembling the box now. So I'm laying the long slide down and just putting the baseboard. Try to use a bit of gravity to help, because this bit of ply is not dead flat, so it takes a little bit of feeding in to get it into the slot. That's got it. I just want to see that that's even at each end. Pretty good. It's actually a sliding fit like the bottom of drawers, so it can move around at a different rate than the solid timber that we have for the rest of the build. So that's that end. Pop on the other end now, up the far end. With any luck, it'll all just slide in. Alright, that's actually looking pretty good so far. Now I'll square it up once I've got all 4 sides on. So I've got the baseboard in now. I'm going to clamp up and just start screwing together.
I'm gluing and air nailing in these 2 little strips of wood just to give the base a little more support. We're in the home stretch of this part of the build, the base of the box. I'm gluing on the upper rim, and this will be the part that supports the roof via hinges and also allows that inner cover planks to sit in place. Now thanks for watching part 3 of the Long Lang build. That's it for this one. Join me in part 4.